Well, hello there and welcome to the first official lesson of the Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge. I am so excited that you're here. Again, we took this challenge back in spring and here it is, the fall season. The colors are changing on the trees. The weather is getting cooler here in Wisconsin, at least where I'm at. But we're just having a fantastic time here diving into the Portrait Painting Challenge again. We had over 700 artists take the first challenge. And what was amazing was that artists who have never painted a portrait before, by the end of taking that challenge, they were able to complete their first successful portrait. A portrait they could sign off on and be proud to show others. And that is my goal for you, that at the end of this challenge, by following the lessons step by step and receiving encouragement from your fellow students, you'll be able to paint a portrait you can be proud of as well. And who knows, it might lead to painting portrait commissions, it might lead to doing paintings for charity, encouraging others with your work, painting all of your grandkids or your children. But whatever your goal is in painting, I want to help you go to the next level in the skill of painting a portrait. And I am just so looking forward to teaching you here. By the way, if you're not signed up for the challenge, if you're not officially registered, this would be a good time to do it. And when you sign up for the challenge, I'm going to send you the supplies list so you know exactly what brushes, what canvas, what colored pencils and other materials you're going to need to paint with us. I'm also going to send you the official reference image. That's the full resolution, printable or downloadable reference image. So you can set that up next to your canvas and you can know exactly how to paint this portrait. I'll have one version that's just the image, and then I'll have another version with the grid, and then that will allow you to get a really precise sketch with very, very accurate likeness. In addition, when you sign up, I'm going to send you the palette layout guide, so you'll know exactly how to lay out your palettes for optical mixing, and so you don't have kind of a mess on your hands. A lot of times, you know, your paints can get muddy as they're in the wrong order. I'll show you exactly how to lay out your colors. I'll also send you the lesson schedule, which is tentative, but it'll basically show you when each lesson should be coming out and what to expect, you know, coming down the pike. And then lastly and not least, I'll send you the step-by-step video lessons, 8 video lessons showing the entire process. And this challenge, by the way, is free. So sign up with full confidence, not going to charge you a thing. But the step-by-step video lessons are going to show you the entire process from sketching, putting down your initial glazes of color, adding form, adding value, adding detail and texture, and finishing up and signing your portrait confidently. So I'll be sending that to you as well. You can sign up at realisticacrylic.com/fall-acrylic-portrait-painting-challenge. And again, when you do, I'll send you that welcome kit right away. You'll be able to print that out and get started with us. But at this point right here, what I'd like to do is just ask a quick blessing on this class. If you followed my work before, it's no secret I'm a Christian, and I do believe that God is the one that gives us our talents as artists. He's the master artist, and to invite Him into the process makes a huge difference. Gives us the confidence we need, knowing that somebody else that knows how to help us is going to be helping us along the way. So let's pray. Father, I ask a blessing on this class, and Lord, you know that apart from you I can do nothing. With you I can do all things. Lord, I remember how you helped me when I taught the spring challenge, and how there were so many artists signed up and they were excited, and so many of them did such a great job. And it was amazing to see that transformation. Some of them had confidence in the middle of COVID-19. Instead of being afraid and not doing anything and just spinning their wheels, they decided to take a challenge and paint. Lord, I pray that you would again bless us as we do this challenge. Lord, I pray that you would be glorified. Help me, Lord, to be able to teach this class well, all of these lessons well, to be able to teach it in such a way that it makes sense to the students, and that they would gain the knowledge they need to be able to do these paintings with confidence. Lord, I pray you bless it. I pray there be many, many artists taking this challenge. 1,000 or even more, Lord, taking this challenge, and that they would really be encouraged and they develop relationships within the Facebook group and not feel like they're alone. So Lord, I pray that you bless the artists, everyone watching, provide for them, keep them safe from sickness, and inspire them, Lord, and multiply their talents in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, with that, we are ready to get started. And so at this stage here, I have the canvas all gridded off. Now, if you've missed this step, I didn't actually teach this initial step of preparing your canvas because I've already taught it before and I didn't want to double up on my work. But you can access the video by registering for the challenge. And when you register on the welcome page, you'll see all the resources listed. It'll have a link for you to be able to see the first 7 videos of one of my classes within Realistic Acrylic Portrait School. And when you click that link, it'll show you the preview videos. You don't have to actually enroll to watch those videos. They'll all be on preview. Be able to go through and click each video showing you how to prepare your canvas, how to gesso it. Because when you get a canvas from the factory, you buy it at the art store, it's just not very high quality. You want to put more layers of gesso on, you want to sand them, and really make that canvas much smoother and much higher quality to paint upon. So again, you will be able to access those videos. They'll show you exactly how to prepare the canvas, how to get the grid set up, and get it up in such a way that when you erase, you won't erase your grid lines. So I have the grid lines faint, but you should be able to just barely see them. And then what I'm using here is a Prismacolor colored pencil. This is dark brown. And I have a high polymer white eraser. Any white eraser will do. You don't want to use a pink eraser, but this will do a really good job erasing any bad lines we put down. All right, now let's begin the sketch. The first step is to get in the outlines. And you'll want to set up your Kindle or your reference photo and have that as close as you can. Get it as close as you can to your canvas, because the closer you have it, the less chance there is for you to lose that visual information. And let's set the stage right now, early on in painting. You don't want to have your reference photo 2 feet away or 5 feet away from your canvas. You have to look away, because you will lose that information just that quick, even in that little bit of time from scanning back and forth. But you want to have that photo right next to your canvas, whether you have a Kindle. And by the way, well, Kindle or iPad will work, any sort of tablet. I do have a free photo reference holder, and again, when you register for the challenge, I'll give you the link to that class as well, and you'll be able to build your own photo reference holder out of cardboard. It's really easy to do. I have a pattern, I show you how to do it, and then you can set that up right next to your canvas, and you'll be able to easily draw what you see. But you can use a Kindle or iPad. You can also just print out the photo as well and just tape it next to your canvas, whatever works for you. Okay, so the first step is to get in the outlines. Now, here we have 1-inch grids. In the past, I've done sketches with 2-inch grids, but because there's so much detail here in this image, let me just show you the image here really quick on the screen. And you can see it's just this beautiful, beautiful image here of this dark-skinned woman. And I wanted the challenge here, excuse me, to focus on dark skin tones, because dark skin tones, we need to know how to paint all different skin tones. And I've never actually done a class or a tutorial on it yet. People have been asking for it, so it's time. And it's one of those things you want to learn how to do, to paint all different people, because God has created variety in the world, and He loves variety. So we want to make sure we know how to do it. So let me zoom in here, and again, with this 1-inch grid, we're going to have 20 squares vertically, 16 squares horizontally. So if you're using the metric system, your squares might be 2.5 millimeters, something like that, or I should say 2.5 centimeters rather. But these are 1-inch squares. And you're going to want to start right at the edge, and I'm going to count off. I'm going to count off here, and I see 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to start right there and start making some lines. I really want to pay attention to where these lines fall. Where these lines fall within the grids, within the squares. And it's going to be fractions, basically. We're looking at a fraction system. You're going to want to make sure you're on track. Some people number their squares. That's something you can do as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I'm at the right spot. So you really want to just make sure you don't miss a square or make your line extend for too many squares. And another tool you want to have is a sharpener. And the sharpener is just a fantastic way to keep your pencil lines really precise. I use an electric sharpener. It's a X-Acto brand. It just works amazingly well. Okay, now we're kind of working into her shoulder area. I don't want to get too detailed. I want to keep the lines pretty loose. I'm using very short, choppy strokes so I can easily erase it. Let's just count across, make sure I did this right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, okay, so I have this sixth square showing that juxtaposition between her upper back and her neck. So I'm right on target. It's always good to double check yourself. You might think, there's no way I could get off track. It's easy to do. I've done it before, let me tell you. So always double check. Okay, we're going to just continue, and we're going to kind of block in her hair a little bit loosely. Get that kind of braided area on the bottom. I don't think these are exactly dreadlocks. I'm not sure exactly what they would be, maybe some kind of a braid, but it's just beautiful hair. I want to be able to capture that well. And let's see, we've got, I'm just going to kind of get the outside edge of her hair, and we really want to keep it pretty loose. Point here. My pencil's getting dull. Alright, and then we will bring the side of her face over. I want to make sure that goes down far enough. I'm just going to erase this line. Should be pretty easy to erase at this point because we haven't pressed in that far. If you do a lot of erasing and redrawing, you might find it a little harder to erase, but this system of the colored pencils works fantastic for erasing, and then it gives us a really natural skin tone because we're using dark brown. It should work perfect for her skin tones. Okay, here's the bottom of her chin, and that seems to come up at maybe, let's see, not quite half the way up, maybe 2/5 of the way up. And then we have just the corner of her jawline represented here. There's a little bit of a divot there on the bottom side of that jawline. I think her jaw's got to come up just a little further on the left. Just erase that a little bit here. Try to keep the lines as light as we can at this stage. Yeah, I think these lines could come out a little bit further. But I don't want to get too picky right now. I do want to refine it later. So let's try to keep it as loose as we can at this stage. Let's see, we're going to come up here with this contour. Now we're getting into the shoulder area and the top part of her dress or blouse where that meets the, let's see, where is that going to come up there? Let's just refine these lines a little bit. I need to make sure I have that shoulder coming up to this point, and then here is the actual edge of her blouse where that works into her chest area. It's kind of a straight line, but it's really, pay attention to your reference photo. It's probably not perfectly straight. And also pay attention to the shapes created by the grid lines as they intersect the lines you're drawing. And that'll really keep your proportions on track. And I can see this is kind of a triangular shape that this makes right here. Now we're going to go across. Okay, that's going to just cross right here. Refine that later too. We'll show where her shoulder and sleeve area meets her chest area. This is just going to go past this position and then it cuts back in again. And now we see a little bit of her arm down here, where that kind of flows in. Get the angle of her chest correct. That cuts all the way back in and it goes to about the halfway point on the bottom. Just to that point right there. And let's see. Now we're going to show her sleeve area. And let's see where that goes. I'm going to count these lines off just to make sure I have it correct. Well, I shouldn't have to do that. I can see the angle right here. It basically starts at this point where we have this opposing angle on her chest. So the sleeve is going to come in not on this line, but basically on this area right here, and then it starts downward. It cuts across, and all the way to the edge. Okay. Alright, and let's see, now I want to just loosely block in the feathers on her necklace there. And that looks like that just kind of sits almost along the vertical grid line, but at the end it just deviates a little bit. There. Okay, and then we'll also sketch in the background loosely as well, and I'm going to follow the photo pretty meticulously. So let's do that. And we're just going to work in the sketch on the top here. So I just want to basically block in that background really loosely at first, just like the rest of the sketch, and then fill in the details later. Although with this background, because it's out of focus, it's not going to be really necessary to add much detail to it. So we just want to basically block in that form where it would begin and end. Yeah, let's see, we kind of have some trees that are poking up here. This angle goes down a little bit. Now, because I have so much visual information already on here with her face, and not her face, but just the outlines of her body, I'll be able to get a gauge for where the outline should go for the background. It gives me a benchmark. This is going to basically cut along the edge. It's going to come up like that. That would be just the top part of the hill. And then I want to sketch in this big white vertical line. So about the midway point for these grid lines, and then it's going to go just to this point right here, and it's going to cut in a little bit. I'm not sure what that is. It's just part of the background. I think it's some land and then a lake or something behind her. And then this one is going to go up to this point. Again, at about the halfway point. The color that is representing probably a lake, but we don't really have to care what it is. We just want to represent what we see, represent the shapes of those darker values. And then when you paint it in, it's going to be that much easier to do because you're going to have a really good foundation. The sketch is so important. The sketch is the foundation for your painting. And I've mentioned this before in other classes that I've done, but the sketch really is like the foundation on a house. If you don't put down, you know, your cement pad or whatever you call it, the cement underlayment, the slab, if you don't put that down level, then when you start adding the floor joists and the other support beams in the house, it's all going to be crooked. And it doesn't matter how well you do the detailing of putting in plumbing and electrical and your walls and your paint and your trim and your cabinets. If you don't have that foundation flush, if you don't have it level, if you don't have it on good soil and it's starting to cave in and sink, it doesn't matter what the rest of your house is. It doesn't matter how well you finished it off. And the same thing with painting. If you don't have that good solid sketch, that accurate sketch with the good composition, with good anatomy, with realistic, accurate likeness, with plotting out the values in accordance with what you see in the reference photo. If you don't have those things done accurately, it doesn't matter how great your skin tones are, it doesn't matter how detailed the hair is, doesn't matter how well you get those twinkles in the eye. You got to have the foundation accurate. So that's what I'm here to help you to do. And again, the sketch is really a great way to set yourself up for success in your portrait painting. At this stage here, I'm going to dive in and I want to start getting in her facial features. Let me sharpen my... Alright, let's work in the details here of her face. And this is actually a different session here, so I just want to pray, Father, bless this as I work on the interior of her face. Help me to be able to capture those nuances and just be able to make this look not only like the subject, but be able to portray the dignity and the confidence that she's exuding, and then also that the students would be blessed as they sketch along with me here, that we'd be able to render this face well and prepare a good foundation for the painting. I ask that in Jesus' name, amen. Alright, so we're going to dive in here, starting with the eyebrows. Just want to look and see where they start. And the eyebrows are the most important, or I should say the eyebrows, but the eyes. And that would actually be the shape of the eyes, the eyelid fold, and the eyebrows. That whole part of the feature set is arguably the most important feature in the human face. So we do want to make sure we're getting that accurate. I really want to look and see where the line starts. And it looks like it starts at this intersection of grid lines. It's going to come above this horizontal grid line. And I want to pay attention to the thickness of the eyebrow, the angle, how far apart the eyebrows are from each other, how far apart they are from the eyes. And that all is going to be very, very important. So it looks like the eyebrows kind of end right here, a little before the grid line, and then they kind of break up at that point. And then the other eyebrow starts, and it just exceeds the vertical running grid line by a little bit. And I really want to, again, pay attention to the angle. It looks like overall the eyebrows are not parallel. Don't make the mistake of drawing them parallel with the grid lines. It looks like the angle tends upward just a little bit. So it's going a little bit steeper than the actual grid lines. And they're going to be a little bit above this grid line here. And then it kind of tilts downward at the edge. It goes actually below, just a little bit below this grid line that's running lengthwise, or I should say horizontally. Now let's kind of sketch in the shape of her eyes. We're going to do this fairly loosely at first. We're going to come back in and tighten it up, but I just want to get the overall shape here. I'm sketching in not just the interior shape of her eyes, but the actual eyelid fold. The upper eyelid fold is super important, and I'm sketching in the shape of the lower eyelid fold, and I'm going to then from that point get the actual shape of the eye itself. Okay, and we just want to, again, really get the distance between the upper and lower eyelid fold, and then that relationship between that line and then to the eyebrow itself. And I need to bring, looks like actual eyelid needs to come up a bit higher. And it should be above the halfway point of this grid. So I had it a little too low. We have the shape here again of, let's sharpen the pencil. You want to have your pencil very, very sharp for this. And really pay attention to that shape of the eye. You don't want to make the mistake of making it look just like a football shape. There are some different angles there. We have an angle that is tending upward in this direction, and then as it gets to the middle of the eye, or a little before the middle of the eye, it tends in this direction. So we do want to show that distinct shape. Now we have the lower eyelid fold, and I'm going to have to refine this a little bit more. The lower eyelid fold shape is very important. And then we want to show the actual, we'll just kind of roughly block in the shape of her iris. And when you're sketching in the shape of the iris, you don't want to make the mistake of concentrating just on that positive space, that positive shape of the circular form of that iris and pupil. Also pay attention to the shape that's left by the cornea, by the white of the eye. And that's going to be really important in just basically getting the dimensions of both parts correct. So look at the positive space of the iris and pupil and the negative space of the white of the eye that's left over. And then this upper eyelid fold here, it's just a bit off. It should cut in a little bit steeper and narrower at the end. It needs to taper in more. And I need to also make sure that it goes all the way to the edge of this grid line. So that's going to be important too. I'm going to bring this out a bit more and let it taper in to that point. And keep in mind too that the eyelid has some thickness to it. It's not paper thin, so I do want to use a thicker line for the actual eyelid below. Okay, we're going to move over to the other eye here, but before I do that, I just want to suggest the form of her nose, that width of her nose, and then the eye socket area as well. And now I'm going to suggest the other more highlighted space of her eye socket and nose area. And we're going to have the tear duct flowing in here, but I need to make sure I get the angles. Again, you're going to have to fight the urge to make those eyes parallel with the grid lines. That'll be your tendency, because we all do that. We all try to order everything in our world, make everything symmetrical and straight, but keep in mind those eyes are at an angle. They're not precisely parallel with the grid lines. So really pay attention where that upper eyelid fold starts and how close it is to the upper grid line here. And I can see that it's maybe about the same width of the actual upper eyelid fold to the bottom eyelid fold. That same distance from that point to the grid line, that's where we should place it. And then how wide is that eye? We want to make sure we get the width correct. And I would say it goes maybe about a little more than a quarter away from the end, an eighth to a quarter the distance away. And I really want to get that shape of the bottom part of the eyelid fold correct. And her eye is just somewhat squinty, just with her expression, so we need to make sure that we show her looking very calm, very relaxed, very serene. And again, looking at that space of the white of the eye and how much is left of that, that'll be super important. I'll be coming back in and refining this. I just want to get the overall shape and make sure I got that correct. We'll be coming back in and refining these shapes. Now let's move down to the nose. And we want to make a decision and just decide where the bottom point of the ball of the nose will be. That's the first line you want to capture. And I would say, it's maybe a third of the way down between these grid lines. So just estimate about a third of the way down. And then we want to basically place the nostrils, which are just a little below the halfway point from what I can see. The other wing of the nose is just going to exceed this vertical line by a little bit, this grid line. And we're putting the bottom part of the nose. And pretty soon we'll move into the mouth area. Now we notice that the mouth, we're going to start just at the upper edge of the lip here, and we're going to take it about as far as it should go widthwise. It looks like it goes just a little bit past the nose widthwise, so it's a little bit further left than the edge of the wing of the nose. And I want to get that upper edge of the lip in there because it's a pretty strong feature. And I do want to make sure I don't make that mouth go too far down vertically. It looks like it's a little above the halfway point. So I need to not only make it wide enough, but I also need to make sure it's positioned correctly vertically speaking as well. That lip is going to just barely touch the top edge of the grid line. And then we have the peak of the lip. That's the little area where it indents in the middle. But keep in mind her head is turned at a slight 3/4 angle. And so because of that, then the peak in the middle of her lip will not be quite in the middle. It's going to be just a bit off center. More if I need to. That's not a problem. Yep, I really want to make sure I have these features correct and not make anything too big or too small. Well, I'm going to come back in and refine that, but first I want to double check the shape that I have for the bottom part of her chin. And also want to start getting in some of the detail of her hair, getting in the structure of her hair. That'll be important. Okay, there's some certain forms of her hair I want to capture in. And just kind of overall get the shadowed shapes here and delineate them from the highlighted forms. So we have very strong lighting, kind of from above. It's kind of backlit, and then also I think there's some reflected light. Maybe the photographer put either an external light or an umbrella, some sort of reflector on her face. But the main light is coming from the back, and that's the light that's being shown on her hair. We want to show that light there. And the shadows, and they're going to occupy distinct shapes, and that's how we're going to really identify the forms of her hair, is by looking at the patterns created. So I'm going to just kind of block in this form here that we have a highlighted form there, and then it's going up at an angle. We have a little form coming down, and then this is going across those two lines at maybe the halfway point. So I'm just trying to keep the shadowed area all together. I'm going to actually start to shade it in so I know what's what. In my mind, that'll help me to keep the forms separate. We have a little form up here, and I really want to pay attention to those shapes. We have a form up here, and we want to pay attention. And I'm just going to use a very thin line here to show the highlighted portion. And there's a darker portion, and it comes down, oh, maybe about 1/3 of the way from the bottom of the horizontal grid line. And we have a few forms on the inside here. We got a shape right there. I want to distinguish that. So we have the shape, and I'm going to fill that in, and it's going to come up at an angle, and it's going to break apart into a larger, almost triangular shape that basically has this kind of an angle right here. And it actually goes below this. I'm just going to fill in this entire area. And even though I know there's some other nuances there, I'm just going to fill it all in. And we can get those other nuances later. What we want to do is describe the highlighted and the shadowed portions as simply and effectively as possible. So now we're going to fill in this lower portion. Really pay attention to how far her hair comes out at this point. And it looks like it goes past the halfway point of these horizontal lines, and it's also running between these verticals. Those details in later on in the actual painting process. But if I can put it in on the sketch here, I might. So we just have a few braids that are kind of curling down, and they meet her neck. They actually rest on her neck a little bit, and then they come down past this horizontal grid line. There's a little block of hair right here. Let's work on her face a little bit more and fill in her eyebrow area. Just want to get that to be the right thickness. I'll make sure her eyebrows are not too thick and not too thin. So the other eyebrow, just kind of sketch that in briefly. I'm not painting in, or sketching in every eyebrow hair. I'm more concerned about the main mass of eyebrows, the angle, the thickness, and I can put in those hairs with paint. So that's the main thing. I will kind of sketch in the shape of her pupils. Just get in that shape. And you'll really have to use the small end of your pencil here. Get it very sharp. Get it to a nice, precise tip. And we just really want to fill in then that shape. Almost begin to get in the suggestions of the reflection of the eye. Even the length of the eyelashes on the edge and where the eyelids meet will really help to make it look like her and get that likeness down. And I would recommend in this, even though you don't have to make it look like her, I would recommend to make it look like her as much as possible, because as you learn how to do this in this example portrait for the challenge, you'll be able to do it as well for future portraits, especially if you want to get into commission portraiture. It'll be very, very beneficial to try to dial in her likeness as much as you can. All right. Now I want to work a little bit more on her mouth and just really dial in that shape. And we're going to do that by getting in some of the shading here. Start to see where a few of those little wrinkles are at in the mouth, and start to capture them in. All right. And I'm going to just erase the top portion of the lip so it's not quite as defined on top, because it is kind of throwing off a little bit of the likeness. Let's just get in that bottom concentric eyelid fold. That's very important for her likeness. And we're right here. It's going to be closer to the bottom edge of the eye, and then it's going to expand out vertically a little wider, and it's then going to cut in, like meeting towards the eyelash at the top. I'm going to suggest a shadow coming from her nose right now. Just bring that down a little bit, coming from the ball of the nose. Yeah, I don't think it's that important to capture that delineation between them when we're putting in the skin tones. If you were painting this opaquely, or even with some aspects of the glazing technique, if we sketch in the face paint, the decorations, you might be tempted then to paint around them, but that's going to make it too hard to block in the forms of the face. So even if we do sketch this in, and that's what I'm going to attempt to do right now, if we sketch this in, we'll just paint, with glazes on top of those lines. And because we're painting translucently, those lines are still going to shine through. You're going to see them toward the end of the painting process. And then with those ghost images of the sketch left over, you'll be able to come in with some opaque titanium white or some mixture of titanium white and come in and put in that face paint. But you'll do a lot of the heavy lifting here in the sketch stage just to get the forms correct. So I'm gonna endeavor to do it just because we have a really detailed photo. I have a sharp pencil, and let's see how this works here. So I'm just going to start on the left here and kind of plot out where they might go. And it looks like and it's going to come up again and flow down towards the side of her face. All right, and we're going to just get the thickness of that line. It's going to be a little skinnier on this right hand side because that's in perspective, and then it's going to get a little thicker on her cheek. Now let's put the other line on. Next dot, it's about there. They get a little progressively smaller, it looks like. We have one that goes a little bit below the line, comes down maybe about there. And then we have one that runs on her lip. And one below her lip, and it's just a little bit to the left of that one. And it's sitting just on the intersection of this line. And then we have one on her chin that's larger. Something like that. Now let's kind of sketch in the form of her ear. A little bit larger there. And I'm going to move the bottom of her eyebrows up just a tiny bit. Show a little bit of the divot between her nose and her lip. And let's kind of sculpt in a little bit of the shading on her face. There's a break right here, and I'm just going to delineate that. Even though it's more of a smooth juxtaposition, more of a smooth gradation, I just want to decide where the overall break in the shadow and highlight will be. And again, the sketch is for your benefit. You just want to know where to put your glazes. It doesn't have to look like a finished drawing. And I have to remind myself that as well. As long as you have basically everything in proper proportion, that's what counts. Okay, let's add a little bit of detail to her hair. I'm just going to see if I can get a few of these little striations in, like going a bit darker. A little bit of a shadow here. And show a little bit of her braid. Shadow right there. Don't want to make it too complex, just a little bit of distinguishing here. Here we have a smaller line representing the braid on the outside. This is more of a large angular shape. There's a little bit of detail in here. See if I can define that. Let's move on to the rest of the portrait, putting the details for her clothing and some of the shading in the background. Then we'll come back to the face and refine it a little bit more. Got a lot of detail here for her clothing. I don't want to put every little bit, but before we do that, we want to get some of the details for her neck area. And we've got a little bit of the upper part of her neck that's illuminated going into the back area. All right, let's work on the shadows here of her neck as we continue on from the face to the body area. And there is a crease on her neck that we want to capture. It kind of runs inside the shadow area. It crosses just between these two grid lines where they intersect. And that's an important line because that delineates her neck from her chest area. So we want to be sure to place that line accurately. We also want to get a line that represents the shadow area of her neck going into the two little tendons, those, I believe, the carotid arteries. So we want to get that in there. And then there's a couple of lines that run along the circumference of the neck, and a shadow underneath her chin that just goes below this horizontal grid line. So we want to block that. And now the shadows have a somewhat ambiguous shape. They're not, it's a cast shadow, but it's a little diffused at the edges. So we're going to have to approximate where the shadow begins and ends. Even though we don't have a super harsh line, we're just going to have to pick a point in that area where the value shifts the fastest and plot out that line. And I'm going to say somewhere about right here. And then right here it gets really ambiguous. But then we have another strong cast shadow right about here. And that's showing, I believe, the area that goes into her clavicle, her shoulder bones, well, and then part of the top of the chest and the bone structure underneath. And then there is a strong shadow right here. You want to show that shape. Really pay attention to the shadow. I think it's coming from her hair, so it is kind of precise. And we want to really get that shape as exact as we can. I'm going to move this line out just a bit to the right. I think I had it a little too far to the left. All right. So then here we can basically begin to fill this in just to delineate that, and so that we know when we're we'll know what we're doing, and we'll be able to put down the glazes confidently without a lot of fuss. So this really begins to describe the form of her neck. And let's see, we've got just part of her necklace cutting up into this line. So here we have the outside portion of her neck and then that artery area. And I want to get just a little bit of an interior shadow right here. So there will be just a little bit of a divot here that we want to capture. And it's going to go just about in this spot at the intersection of these lines, the vertical and the horizontal grid line, but then just a little bit to the left of that. And then we have this line going across that form as well. And we have a shadow that's kind of showing the clavicle area, that bony part of the chest where that meets the neck structure. And let's see, I want to position that just right. It looks like it's a little lower. The form of the shadow actually goes right in about the middle of this grid line. And because there's a little bit of reflected light from beneath, maybe her dress or the photographer's reflector, whatever he has below, or the ground, we have a shadow actually on the top where you'd expect it to be in the inverse. And so we have the highlight on the bottom, and then we have a shadow right here. So we want to really accurately render these forms and get these shapes accurate. Get them in the right spot. There is a line. All right, we're just going to get these feathers rendered over here. And there's a white part on the inside. We'll have to put that in probably opaquely later on. For now, we just want to glaze it in very gently. Let's bring the interior of the dress in just a bit more. Okay, I just want to make sure I have her shoulder looking appropriate. Here the line, you actually lose the definition. You actually lose the definition of the line right there because the highlight on her shoulder is so bright that it's actually white. Believe it or not, this is skin up here, but it's actually white. And when we paint it, we're going to paint it that way. So you actually lose the definition between the dress and her skin tone. But let's get this little shadow in here. This is again part of her shoulder structure and where it meets her chest. And so we want to get that in accurately. And we're just going to shade it in just so we know to paint that. There's a little bit of a feather, I think, coming out right here, and it's kind of in perspective and it's at the side, so we're just going to render that, suggest that in there. Now let's take a look at this edge of her dress and put a little detail to it. It's the top part of the fabric where it meets her skin. There's a few little divots, little textural areas we want to capture. You don't want to pattern it. Really look for the reference photo and try to follow as close as you can the little patterns you see there. This area that meets into the feather. There's a little cast shadow just below that. A little bit of a cast shadow just below that. All right. Now let's start doing some of the textural areas on the interior of her dress. All right, want to make sure first of all we have the form rendered accurately. We want to refine any of the edges that need to be refined. Make sure this is meeting in the right spot. All right, it's going to end right about there. And I want to refine the interior of her sleeve. And yeah, I better move to that side and just refine the interior of her sleeve a little bit. Right about here. Just want to show the interior side roughly edge here. I'd like to show. And I believe this was for their wedding day. Other photographs, I looked at in the album from the photographer. And I believe based on what I saw, there was a groom there. So this was actually wedding photography or engagement photography. All right, we're just going to show the puffiness of the sleeve here, or I should say the upper part of the opening of her blouse. And there's almost a little bit of translucency under it. You can see the form of her arm, which is kind of cool. So let's capture that to shadow, basically. It's going to intersect at this grid line. It's going to go up past it. It's going to change form just a little bit. And it's going to flow in and then upward. We might want to just suggest some of the textural areas here of the fabric itself. We're not going to be able to get it all in with the sketch. We just want to get in the main forms. All right, we're just basically going to block this in. I am not going to draw every little texture. Here's a strong one right here. And that's going to flow in just about at this point. And then right there. So I'm really kind of paying attention to what it's doing within the context of the grid line. All right, so you have to, it's kind of hard to remember what line you were on. You can almost get lost in all these lines, so you really have to look for the distinctive patterns. And if this is your first time painting a portrait, don't worry about getting all these textural lines. Concentrate more on the face. I'm just doing this to make it fun. If you make these random and they're not as precise, that's okay. You'll do better to make this more ambiguous and not try to get every line in. But I'm having fun with it. That is. We just want to show that. And we're just going to fill in this form overall. And there's an area where it almost kind of ends at the top, and we want to show that ruffled edge, so to speak. Kind of keep the pencil strokes going in the direction of the fabric. Really pay attention to the angle of that. It's basically running at an angle like this, but there's some randomness to it. Okay. Now let's work on the interior to get some of the texture of the fabric on her chest. That's going to be a little more of a challenge. All right, let's continue with this here. We're going to add these textures now to the underside of her dress. And just going to look for the overall. First of all, let's capture the seams here. We kind of have, it's almost like a threaded area. And it goes across. We want to get those contours first, and then we want to get the verticals. So let's do the horizontal lines first and then the verticals. I think that's going to make it easier. And right up on top there's a kind of a area where the texture is different. It's almost like a doily fabric. So we're going to get that in first. And we really want to see this in the way that it looks in relation to the reference photo. You can just draw this pretty lightly. And it can fade off as it gets towards the right side because there it's highlighted, so I'm not gonna bring these lines all the way to the edge. I'm just gonna kind of fade them off as they get towards the right side. Here this one goes below a little bit and then it rides right below the grid line. Alright, so this is going to be right about the halfway point. I want to show a little irregularity. It comes up a little higher. It's not precisely parallel with the horizontal grid lines. It does come up just a bit. And then I'm going to fade it off at the edge. Now the next one is going to go a little bit below the intersection of this grid line. And then a little come back up a little higher again, a little higher. almost meeting the intersection of these grid lines here. It just touches barely this horizontal grid line. It goes down again. Okay, the next line is going to come down just at the intersection of the sleeve and then this other line here. Right, and it's just going to right about here. It's going to come up the other way now. Yep, and then there's one more that you're going to capture. It kind of comes down a little bit. That's actually just part of the waistline, which is basically cropped off. Alright, I'm just going to define the edge on this a little more. I don't want to get all the edges defined, but I want to suggest them in there a little bit. Okay, now let's see if we can get in the vertical textured areas on her blouse here. This is going to be a little more challenging, but let's do it. Let's dive in. We're going to start with the top, kind of work our way down, and just try to get a few of the textures in. I don't want to get every single line in there, but I do want to at least suggest some of the major textural areas. I also want to really get in the major shape of the shadow, and let's get that forming first. It's kind of hard, but we're going to have to say it's going to end somewhere about here. This is where the shadow ends and the highlight starts. Even though it's a little ambiguous, you want to step back a little bit from your reference photo and really identify where that shape begins and ends. And that's going to really help. And I'm going to say it's somewhere right in this area right here. And then there's a fold along the bottom edge. So I really want to identify that shape from the reference photo and just block that in very loosely. Alright, so this is where I'm going to make that shadow go, and I'm looking at how far on the grid lines it goes out. And here kind of juts out just a bit, stops right there, comes down a little bit into that bottom grid, and then it gets kind of blocked off right here. So we can just shade this in ever so slightly, just to suggest that it is as they get to this extreme edge. All right, so the lines flow at different angles here. I'm going to get a couple major ones, and let's see, this one kind of flows out like this. And it's just going above the grid line a tiny bit. And we have another one flowing out like that. And another one flowing out like this. And we have a couple flowing out in this direction. We're not going to be able to get every little nuance in there. I just want to get the overall flow of it so that when I paint, I can get those textures delineated further. Just allow the sketch to be able to get the main forms. This almost reminds me of pleating on an air filter. If you've ever changed the air filter in your car or looked at the air filter in your car, maybe an air conditioning unit, this reminds me of kind of the pleating of the air filter. If you zoom in on it, it really looks like that quite a bit. But I'm sure that actually enables the skin to breathe very well and actually causes some of the heat to dissipate. So it probably performs a really good function in that way. Okay, I'm going to just really look at the overall lines here, capture a couple of lines going almost parallel with the grid lines, but not quite. They're changing angles at this point. And we have a couple going this way. And we have a major line going this way. I'm just trying to look for those major lines that are a little darker than the other ones. Something that I can use for a benchmark so I can place the other ones. Not sure how many I'm going to sketch in, but when I paint, I want to be able to place those other ones in. Just kind of using a cross-hatching technique, almost using the side of my pencil for that. Here I'm going to accentuate a couple more of the folds in the fabric. Doesn't have to look exactly like the reference photo. You don't have to have every single pattern in the same place. You just want to get the overall effect. A couple little lines going here. These lines are going to be changing angle. So you want to just really pay attention to the overall angle. That's the most important thing. A couple of lines going at an angle like this. And then here, as they come down, they do get a little bit straighter. We want to accentuate this shadow here. Again, it's more ambiguous than this. It doesn't have such a harsh edge, but I am just picking an area and saying that's where the shadow is basically going to begin and end. And I can break it up by having a few little of these pleated wrinkles just kind of rise above the main shadow shape a little bit. All right, we just want to make sure we have your overall forms of these wrinkles following where they should. Okay, we're going to step back here and kind of see what we've got. Yeah, I think that really starts to get the form in of her clothing and her body. And yeah, that's good. Maybe I'll add just a couple of little wrinkles right here. Just make sure they're in the right place. Should be one kind of towards the bottom. Don't have to put in every little line, just kind of the ones that stand out more, that have more contrast. right, there we go. Okay, now at this point, let's start blocking in a little more form of the background. This is where we're at right now. We're getting really close to having this sketch done. We just want to put in a little more shading for the background, delineate the forms, and then lastly, we'll just touch up any areas that need to be touched up. And we'll call the sketch done. Now I'm just going to darken this area right above this horizon line. I'm not sure if that's the land and ground area, but let's darken that a little bit. There are a few forms I want to pay attention to. There's kind of like a tree area there, so let's delineate that just a little bit. We'll just fill this in. Kind of a little shadow here, and then around it there's a tree. And I'm just going to block it in using the side of my pencil. So just block it in very loosely. You don't want to take too much time on it or put too much detail to it. Since it is the background, I'm going to block in the top and just shadow that a little bit. And we can get a little bit of a contrast between her hair, which is actually lighter than the background, a little bit on the highlighted areas, not on the shadowed areas, but the highlighted areas. And then we have the form of a tree over here, and I just want to separate that, make a decision now where that's going to be roughly. It'll make it a lot easier to start glazing it in. And so we can see, even though it's ambiguous, it's out of focus, it's going to come over here. And we just want to very loosely represent those forms and a little bit below. And I think that'll be good. So then we'll just kind of fill this area in, whatever that is. It's kind of some darker spots. And then we have this form here. And I'm just going to accentuate that, the shadowed part of it below. We have this area right here. I'm going to fill in that. That should be in shadow. That way when I glaze it, I'll know that that should be in shadow. This area up here should be in shadow. And I'm going to separate her shoulder area from the shadowed area, whatever this is. There's just a little circular area. I want to capture that. It's going to make it easier to do it now. And this is going to really help make it out of focus, just to put in this kind of circular oval form. That's often what you'll have when you have out of focus areas. They develop these circular patterns. So we're going to put those little circular oval patterns in, representing some lighter areas of the background that are out of focus. Looks like there's one right here as well, just at this juxtaposition. Yeah, there are a couple in this area as well. I'm going to put them in. Yeah, we could just paint them in, but it'll be easier to make those decisions now. Okay. A little bit of trees behind her head. I want to block those in quickly. All right, let's see if there's anything else we can do. Just kind of blend a few areas on her chest. The differentiation there between the white and that color of her skin tone. Let's smooth that out with the eraser. And just darken a few areas on her face, especially your cheekbone areas. Just the slightest little divot right here I want to capture above her eyebrow. Okay. Zoom out and take a look at the whole thing. All right, and here we have a finished sketch. So we can take a peek at it, see what you've accomplished, and you know, it's good. It's looking really good. I think that when you're finished with your sketch, you're going to be pleased with what you did. Now, you might find a few areas that could use a little improvement. That's okay, because we're going to be able to finish this off when we actually begin the painting process. It doesn't have to look perfect. You just want to have a really good, accurate foundation to build your painting upon. And at this stage here, I would like to converse with you, help you with your portrait. So leave me a comment in this video. If I can answer any quick questions, I'll be happy to do it. I do have some more help available at Realistic Acrylic Portrait School. I have several members that have already signed up in the last challenge, and they've been with me all during this time at the All Access membership. And in the All Access membership, you'll have access to critiques, you'll have access to more lessons, you'll get some bonus videos that I just don't have time to post here on YouTube and on my blog. Anyway, I would love to help you further over there, but if I can answer any quick questions, or if you'd like some comments on your sketches, go ahead and make sure you sign up for the Facebook group, and that's called Realistic Acrylic Portraits, and that's my private group. In that Facebook group, you'll get some encouragement, you'll get some feedback on your paintings, on your sketches. If you have any questions, I hop in that group from time to time, and I'll be happy to help you with your portrait. I don't want you to feel like you're alone, especially during this time where many of us are still kind of feeling the effects of COVID-19. I want you to feel like you have friends and you have fellow artists that are willing to help you take your work to a higher level. So we're finished with the sketch, and in the next step, in the next lesson, I'm going to teach you how to seal in the sketch properly so it doesn't get all smudgy and mess up what you did, and you're going to have the painting then ready to proceed into the actual first foundations of glazing. And it's going to be a lot of fun diving into the painting process. So that's what's coming up next. But for now, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. Thank you for taking the challenge. Again, if you're not signed up, go to realisticacrylic.com. You'll find the sign up button right at the top of the page. Would love to have you be part of the challenge. And you'll be able to paint a portrait you can be proud of. So again, thanks so much for watching. Share this video with your friends, subscribe to the channel, like this video, let others know about this portrait painting challenge, and they'll appreciate that. But again, thank you so much for your time. God bless, and we'll see you in the next lesson.